Amid a Montana snowstorm, a 7-year-old girl huddled in her thin coat while her own father sped away, leaving the white curtain of snow to swallow his child. Her small cries rose into the wind, unheard and slowly fading. Yet several miles away, a former soldier sensed that something was wrong, something in that frozen silence was pleading to be found. The snow fell thickly like white cotton, blanketing the winding road through the mountains and forests of Montana. An old pickup truck crept along the icy roadway, its tires carving deep tracks into the freshly fallen snow. Behind the wheel, Jack Mercer sat upright, his pale blue eyes fixed on the road ahead. He was 34 years old, yet his face was worn and cracked like that of a man who had lived far longer. The lines around his eyes were the result of long days staring into the blazing sun of the Middle Eastern desert. 12 years. 12 years since he had left home to join the military. 12 years believing he was protecting something important, yet now, having returned, he was no longer certain what any of it had meant. What did I fight for? What did I come home for? He asked himself. His parents were gone. The old house was now nothing more than 4 empty walls. His childhood friends had built lives of their own, and he, Jack Mercer, was now a stranger in his own hometown. The snow fell harder. Visibility dropped to only a few yards ahead. Jack slowed down and switched on his high beams. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of something through the windshield, a small figure. He opened the truck door and stepped out. The cold wind cut into his skin. Snow stung his eyes, but he paid it no mind. He ran forward, his boots sinking deep into the snow. The closer he got, the clearer the image became. A little girl, about 7 years old, wrapped in a thin coat, huddled by the side of the road. Her face was bluish-purple, her lips pale. Her eyes were tightly shut, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. "No," Jack whispered, his voice catching in his throat. He dropped to his knees beside her, his trembling hands reaching out to check her. Her skin was ice-cold, but there was still a faint trace of warmth. Still alive, still a chance. All the thoughts, questions, and painful memories racing through Jack's mind vanished. In that moment, there was only one thing left: save this child. Jack shrugged off his heavy military jacket and wrapped it tightly around her. He lifted her into his arms and ran back toward the truck. Each step sank deep into the snow, but he did not slow down. He opened the door, laid her gently on the passenger seat, and turned the heater to full blast. He rubbed her small hands carefully, trying to bring life back into them. "Listen to me," Jack said hoarsely. "You're going to be okay. I won't let you go." Her face was still pale, but the blue tint had begun to fade from her lips. Her breathing was weak, yet steadier. Jack slid back into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His mind was spinning. What was happening? Why would a child be abandoned in the middle of a snowstorm? Who could have done this? Those questions would have to wait. Right now, she needed to be somewhere safe. Jack looked down at the girl's ashen face, and once again the memory of Hassan, the Iraqi boy, came rushing back. That time, he had been too late. That time, all he could do was stand there and watch as everything slipped beyond saving. But not this time. He pressed the accelerator, and the truck surged forward, plowing through the deep snow and back onto the road. His eyes were no longer empty. Within them, a small spark of purpose had begun to burn. Perhaps, after so many years of being lost, Jack Mercer had finally found a reason to go on. 10 minutes passed in silence. There was only the howl of the wind outside and the low hum of the heater. Jack did not dare take his eyes off the girl, as if simply by watching her, he could keep life from slipping out of that small body. Then her eyelids fluttered. Jack leaned forward, holding his breath. Each second stretched on like a century. Finally, the girl's eyes opened, pale blue eyes, filled with fear. "Mister," her voice was barely a whisper, trembling. Who are you?" Jack let out a quiet breath of relief and managed a faint smile. "I'm just someone passing by. I saw you lying by the roadside and brought you into the truck to warm up. My name is Jack. What's your name?" The girl looked at him, hesitant. Her lips trembled, as if she were weighing whether she should speak. At last, in a voice as soft as the wind, My name is Lily." "Lily," Jack repeated gently. "That's a beautiful name. Lily, I need to know what happened. Why were you out there all alone in the middle of a snowstorm?" Lily lowered her gaze to her small hands. Her fingers were beginning to warm, but they still shook. Tears welled up and dripped onto the military jacket wrapped around her. "My dad, He left me there, she said, her voice breaking. He said I was too much trouble for him. A 7-year-old child, abandoned in a snowstorm by her own father. He said that? Jack asked, forcing his voice to stay calm despite the storm rising inside him. He brought you there and left you? Lily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't know why. He wasn't like this before. When my mom was still with us, he was really nice. But after she passed away, he married Vanessa. After that, everything changed. Vanessa? Jack asked softly. My stepmother, Lily explained, her voice growing quieter. She always smiles when other people are around. But when it's just me and her, she never smiles. She says I'm a burden. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Lily's words fell into place like pieces of a puzzle, forming a dark picture of a broken family. Dad listens to everything Vanessa says, Lily went on, her voice shaking. Lately, he's completely changed. He treats me like I'm a stranger. Last night, he told me to get in the car. He said we were going somewhere fun. But when we got here, he stopped the car and told me to get out. Then he left me. Tears slid down her face, but Lily did not cry out loud. It was a silence more painful than sobbing the silence of a child who had grown used to not being heard. Jack felt anger flare inside him, but he pushed it down. This was not the time for anger. This was the time to protect her. Lily, Jack said, his voice slow and steady, I promise you this. From now on, you will be safe. I won't let anything bad happen to you. Lily looked up at him, her blue eyes filled with doubt and a fragile trace of hope. But, you're a stranger. Why would you help me? Jack was quiet for a moment, meeting her gaze. And in that instant, he saw another image, a boy of 8 in Iraq, with eyes just like hers. Hassan, the boy he had not been able to save, the boy whose memory had haunted him for years. Not this time. Because you need help, Jack replied, his voice rough. And I can't turn my back on someone who needs help. Lily stared at him, as if searching his words for a lie. But all she found was sincerity. Slowly, she gave a small nod. I trust you, she whispered. Something shifted inside Jack, something he thought he had lost long ago. Responsibility, purpose, meaning. He looked out through the windshield. The snow was still falling thick and heavy. He had planned to take Lily to the police station. It was the proper thing to do. But when he looked back at the fear in her eyes, he hesitated. If he took her to the police, they would contact her father. And if that man was capable of abandoning his own child in a snowstorm, who knew what else he might do? Jack needed time. Time to understand what was really going on. Time to protect Lily. Lily, he said, I know a place where you can stay for now. 2 very kind people. They'll take care of you while I find out what really happened. Do you trust me? Lily hesitated, then nodded again. Jack pressed the accelerator, and the truck surged forward, plowing through the deep snow. In his mind, a plan began to take shape. He would take Lily to the home of Henry and May Whitaker, the elderly couple who had helped him when he was young. Then he would uncover the truth about Mark Carter and Vanessa. Beside him, Lily sat quietly, wrapped tightly in the jacket. She gazed out the window at the swirling snow. The fear was still there, but now there was also a fragile spark of hope. Hope that perhaps, in this world, there were still good people. The Whitaker family's log cabin sat at the very end of a narrow trail, tucked away among snow-covered pine trees. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows like a beacon in the bitter night. When Jack pulled up in front of the porch, the door was already open. May Whitaker stepped outside with a wool scarf wrapped around her neck, her kind eyes shining with concern. "Jack!" she exclaimed, her voice full of surprise. "You're back! Henry, Jack's here!" Jack got out of the truck and opened the passenger door. Lily was still wrapped in his military coat, sitting curled up and staring at the unfamiliar house with wary eyes. The moment May saw the child, she understood. Without asking a single question, she hurried down the steps, arms opening wide. "Oh, you poor child. Come inside, sweetheart. It's far too cold out here." Lily looked at Jack, as if waiting for permission. He gave her a small nod and a reassuring smile. "It's okay. May and Henry are the kindest people I've ever known." Lily slowly climbed out of the truck, her small hand clutching the hem of Jack's jacket. May gently led her inside, while Henry, a silver-haired man with a weathered face, stood in the doorway, his eyes fixed on Jack, full of questions. "What's going on, Jack?" he asked quietly. "I'll explain later," Jack replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Right now this little girl needs care." Inside the cozy house, the fireplace crackled, sending warmth through the living room. May settled Lily near the fire, tucked a thick wool blanket around her, and brought her a bowl of hot soup. "Eat, dear, it'll warm you up." Lily held the bowl, her hands still trembling. She took small sips, her eyes drifting around the room, the worn armchair, the family photographs on the walls, the familiar scent of pinewood. Everything was strange, yet it brought her a curious sense of safety. Jack sat across from them and told the Whitakers everything from finding Lily in the snowstorm to what she had shared with him. Henry listened, his expression growing more serious by the minute. May sighed softly, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "How could a father do such a thing to his own child?" "Something isn't right," Jack said gravely. "I need time to figure it out, and Lily needs a safe place to stay." Henry nodded. "You don't need to worry. She'll be safe here." Over the next few days, Lily slowly adjusted to life at the Whitakers' home. At first, she remained guarded and quiet, often startling at sudden noises. But May's gentle care, warm meals, bedtime stories gradually melted the ice around her heart. One evening, when Jack stopped by, Lily was sitting by the fireplace, drawing with the colored pencils May had given her. She had drawn a small house in the snow, smoke curling from its chimney. Jack sat down beside her. "That's a lovely drawing, Lily." She looked up at him, pressed her lips together, then spoke softly. "Mr. Jack, I remembered something else." Jack listened closely. "Before my dad left me, he made me sign some paper," Lily said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't read all of it, but he said, 'You'll be living with someone else from now on.' I was scared, but he made me sign." Jack felt his pulse pounding in his temples. Legal documents. A transfer of guardianship. It was all becoming painfully clear this hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment act by an overwhelmed father. It had been planned. The next morning, Jack drove to the town of Bozeman, where the Carter family lived. He had done his homework. Mark Carter was an accountant at a local firm, and his wife, Vanessa, worked in marketing. On the surface, they were the picture of a perfect family. The Carter house stood on a quiet street, modern in design, with a neatly manicured lawn. Jack rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened. A woman in her mid-30s stood before him, straight blonde hair, tasteful makeup, poised and polished. Vanessa Carter. Her smile was flawless, almost too flawless. "Yes? How can I help you?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold. "Hello, I'm an old friend of Mark's," Jack said casually. "My name's Jack Mercer. I just got back to Montana and heard Mark was living here, so I thought I'd stop by." Vanessa looked him up and down, assessing. "Oh, Mark's inside. Please, come in." Jack stepped inside. The house was elegantly furnished, leather sofas, walnut tables, expensive artwork on the walls. But there were no photos of Lily, no sign at all that a child had ever lived there. Mark Carter emerged from his home office, a thin man with thinning hair and tired eyes. When he saw Jack, he flinched slightly, clearly uneasy. "Jack Mercer," Mark stammered. "Ah, it's been a long time." "Yeah, a long time," Jack said, shaking his hand. Mark's hand was cold and damp with sweat. They sat in the living room. Vanessa poured tea, maintaining that perfect smile, but Jack noticed her eyes never left him, tracking his every move. "So, what brings you back to Montana?" Mark asked stiffly. "Just visiting home," Jack replied. "I heard you've got a family now. A daughter, right?" The air instantly grew tense. Mark swallowed hard and avoided Jack's gaze. Vanessa kept smiling, but her eyes turned colder. "Lily, she's gone to live with someone else," Vanessa said smoothly, with careful calculation. "We decided it was best for her to live with another family, one that could take better care of her." Jack looked straight into her eyes, unblinking. "That sounds sudden. How old is she now?" 7, Mark answered softly, almost in a whisper. His eyes were red, as if he were holding something back. Jack could feel it. This was not a heartless father. This was a weak man, pulled into something far darker than he could control. Jack stood, thanked them, and took his leave. But just before he walked out, his eyes caught something on Mark's desk, a thick folder, clearly labeled, "Lily Carter Trust Fund." Something was very, very wrong, and Jack was going to uncover the truth. Jack sat in his truck, gripping his phone tightly as he stared at the photos he had secretly taken at the Carter house. The screen glowed in the evening darkness, clearly displaying every line on the folder. Lily Carter Trust Fund total assets, $24.7 million USD. $24 million. The money Lily's late mother had left to her daughter. But what stunned Jack even more than the amount was the small italicized note beneath it. Special provision: if the beneficiary passes away before reaching the age of 18, all assets shall revert to the designated legal guardian. Jack read it again, every word burning into his mind. The legal guardian, Mark Carter, and if Lily were gone, everything would belong to him. To them. Jack's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Everything was clear now, a cold, carefully calculated plan. He opened his contacts and found the name Alex Reeves, his old army buddy, now a detective with the Montana State Police. The phone rang 3 times before the familiar voice answered. "Jack, haven't heard from you in a long time, buddy. You back in Montana?" "Alex, I need help," Jack said bluntly, his voice grave. "Can you look into 2 people for me? Mark Carter and Vanessa Carter. They live in Bozeman." There was the sound of a keyboard on the other end. "Give me a second." "Yeah, here they are. Mark Carter, accountant. Vanessa Carter, marketing professional." "Why? Are they under investigation for anything?" A pause. Then Alex lowered his voice. "I shouldn't really say this, but yes, there's a quiet investigation into financial fraud. Illegal transfers from a trust fund. We're gathering evidence." Jack's heart pounded. "A child's trust fund, right?" "How do you know that?" Alex asked, surprised. "Because I pulled that child out of a snowstorm a few days ago." 2 hours later, Jack and Alex sat in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, untouched cups of coffee growing cold between them. Alex spread documents across the table: bank transaction reports, legal files, recorded phone calls. "They've moved over $2 million from Lily's fund in the past 6 months, Alex explained, pointing to the figures. "Shell accounts, layered transfers, very sophisticated." "And Lily's disappearance?" Jack asked. Alex opened another file. "We've suspected something for a while. Vanessa had been researching child accidents, browser history, books on life insurance. If Lily had died in a tragic accident, no one would have questioned it." Anger flared inside Jack like fire, but he kept his voice steady. "And now? Now that you've saved the child, everything changes," Alex said. "As long as Lily's alive, they can't complete the plan. But you need to protect her carefully. People like this don't give up easily." Jack nodded. "Can you help me gather enough evidence to bring them down?" "I'll do my best," Alex replied, "but it'll take time. Keep Lily somewhere safe, and don't let anyone know where she is." By the time Jack returned to the Whitakers' house, it was late. The living room lights were still on. He stepped inside and saw Lily sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames dance. May sat beside her, knitting. "Uncle Jack!" Lily's eyes lit up when she saw him. She ran over and wrapped her arms around his legs. Jack bent down and gently stroked her hair. "You're still awake?" "I was waiting for you," Lily said softly. "I made you a drawing." She handed him a piece of paper. On it were 2 figures, a tall man in a coat and a small child holding his hand. Behind them stood a warm house, smoke rising from the chimney. Above, the sun shone brightly in the sky. Jack felt his throat tighten. "It's beautiful, Lily. I'll keep it forever." Lily smiled a real, radiant smile, one Jack had never seen from her before. And in that moment, everything he had been through, war, loss, painful memories, suddenly had meaning. He wasn't just saving Lily. She was saving him, too. In the days that followed, Lily changed noticeably. She laughed more, played in the snow with Henry. May taught her how to cook, how to bake cookies. Every evening, Jack came by to visit, telling her stories about Montana, about the mountains, the forests, and the good things still left in the world. One afternoon, as light snow fell, Jack and Lily built a snowman in the yard. Lily giggled as she put one of Henry's old wool hats on its head. "Uncle Jack," she called cheerfully, "I really like it here. I feel safe." Jack knelt down and looked straight into her eyes. "And I'll make sure you always are, Lily. I promise." She looked at him, then asked softly, "Uncle Jack, why are you so good to me? I'm just a strange kid." Jack smiled and gently patted her head. "Because you deserve to be loved, Lily. Every child does." Tears shimmered in Lily's eyes, but they were tears of joy. She hugged him tightly and whispered, "Thank you." And Jack, a man who once believed he had nothing left to give, felt warmth return to his heart. That night, after Lily had gone to sleep, Jack sat by the fireplace with the Whitakers. "What's your plan now?" Henry asked. "I'm going to protect her," Jack replied firmly. "And I'll make sure the people who want to hurt her pay for it." May placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've found your purpose, Jack. You're not lost anymore." Jack watched the flames flicker. She was right. For the first time in years, he knew what he was living for. Not for war, not for the past, but for the future, for Lily, for hope. And he would not let anyone take that away. Jack's phone rang sharply at 6 in the morning. Alex Reeves's voice came through, urgent and tense. "Jack, they know. Mark and Vanessa have just hired private attorneys and are demanding to locate Lily. They're claiming the child was kidnapped. Local police are going to have to investigate. You need to be careful." Jack sat bolt upright in bed, fully alert in an instant. "Do they know where Lily is?" "Not yet, but they will soon. Protect the child." Jack hung up, got dressed quickly, and drove straight to the Whitakers' house. When he arrived, the sky was still dim, fog hanging low over the trees. Henry was already awake, heating water to make coffee. "Something wrong, Jack?" Henry asked, seeing the seriousness on his face. "They're coming," Jack said shortly. "I need you and May to keep Lily inside, lock the doors, and don't open them for anyone except the police with a court order." May stepped out, worry written all over her face. "Jack, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect the child," Jack said firmly. "No matter what." At 9 o'clock, a black SUV pulled up in front of the Whitakers' gate. Two men got out, both dressed in neat suits, their expressions cold and aggressive. A third man remained in the vehicle, talking on the phone. Jack stood on the porch, hands on his hips, staring them down. "This is private property. What do you want?" The taller man stepped forward and held out a document. "We represent Mr. Mark Carter. He demands that his daughter Lily Carter be returned to him under his parental rights." Jack glanced at the paper. It wasn't a court order, just a letter from a private attorney. He folded it and handed it back. "This isn't a court order. You have no authority here." The second man moved closer, his voice turning threatening. "You don't want trouble. Hand over the child, and everything stays simple." Jack didn't move. "Lily is safe, and I won't hand her over to people who abandoned her in a snowstorm." The tension spiked. The taller man reached inside his jacket, and Jack recognized the movement instantly. His soldier's instincts kicked in. In a split second, Jack lunged forward, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted his arm, and locked it behind his back. The second man rushed in, but Jack spun fast and delivered a precise kick to his knee, sending him crashing to the ground. Within seconds, both men were subdued. Jack held them firmly, his voice icy. "I spent 12 years fighting in the Middle East. Don't think you can intimidate me." Henry ran out with rope. Together, they restrained the two men and immediately called the local police. At the same time, in Bozeman, Alex Reeves and his investigative team raided the Carter home, armed with a court-issued search warrant based on evidence of financial fraud. Vanessa Carter tried to delete data from her computer, but Alex was faster. He seized the laptop, hard drives, and every document connected to Lily's trust fund. In Mark's office, they found an audio recording a conversation between Mark and Vanessa from a few days earlier. "I can't stand that little girl anymore. She drains all our time and money. If she's gone, we'll have everything. But she's my daughter. You're too weak. We need that money to pay off our debts. Leave her out in a snowstorm, no one will suspect a thing." When Mark heard the recording, he collapsed into a chair, his face pale, his hands shaking. As the police read him his rights, he broke down and confessed, tears streaming down his face. I was weak. I didn't want to do this to my child, but I was afraid of Vanessa. I was drowning in debt. I didn't know what else to do. Vanessa was different. She tried to flee through the back door but was stopped by officers. Even under arrest, she remained cold and silent, offering no confession. That afternoon, when everything had finally settled, Jack sat by the fireplace with Lily. She was wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red from crying. "Uncle Jack, I was so scared," she whispered. "When I heard noises outside, I thought they were coming to take me away." Jack pulled her into his arms, his voice gentle. "But I didn't let that happen, did I? And now they can't hurt you anymore." Lily looked up at him, tears spilling over, but these were tears of relief, not fear. "I knew you'd protect me. I trust you." Her words melted something deep inside Jack. He looked into Lily's clear eyes, and for a moment, the image of Hassan the Iraqi boy returned to him. But this time, there was no pain, only peace. This time, he had done it. This time, he had saved the child. This time, the memories no longer haunted him. "Do you know something, Lily?" Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me too, just like I saved you." Lily hugged him tightly and whispered, "I love you, Uncle Jack." And Jack, the man who once believed he had nothing left to give, felt his heart overflow with love. Alex called with the news. "Mark and Vanessa have been arrested. They're facing serious charges. The girl is safe now, Jack." Jack hung up and looked out the window. Snow was still falling lightly, but it no longer felt cold. The sky was beginning to brighten. For the first time in many years, Jack felt he wasn't just surviving. He was truly living. For Lily. For hope. For love. The cold light of a winter sun filtered through the windows of the law office, casting pale streaks across the wooden floor. Lily sat on a chair far too tall for her, her feet dangling above the ground, both hands clutching the stuffed bear May had just given her. Across from her sat the prosecutor, a grey-haired woman with a serious face, softened by gentle eyes. "Lily, sweetheart, can you tell me about that night?" she asked kindly. "When your father took you into the car?" Lily looked down at the bear, her small fingers rubbing its soft fur. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Jack sat beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder, a reassuring gesture, yet he could feel her trembling. "There's no rush," the prosecutor continued. "We can take a break any time you need." Lily took a deep breath and began to speak. She talked about that night, about her father's cold stare, about the words that shattered her heart. Each sentence felt like a shard of glass, cutting into her memories. When she finished, Lily did not cry. She simply sat there, silent and empty. The third interview took place the following week, then the fourth. Each time, Lily had to repeat the same painful story. Each time, the wounds inside her were torn open again before they had a chance to heal. Back at the Whitakers' house, she grew quieter. She no longer laughed the way she had before. At meals, she picked at her food and pushed the plate away. May watched her with worry, unsure how to reach the pain buried so deep inside. When night fell, the nightmares began. Lily woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her breathing rapid and shallow. In her dreams, she was back on the frozen ground, alone, with no one coming to save her. She called for Uncle Jack, for May, but no one heard. May rushed into the room and pulled her into her arms. "It's all right, sweetheart. I'm here." But Lily kept shaking. "Grandma, if I'm not good, will you leave me too like my dad did?" The question pierced May's heart like a knife. She held Lily tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Never, my child. I will never leave you. Never." But in Lily's eyes, trust had begun to crack. She had once believed her father loved her, and then he left her in a snowstorm. How could she trust anyone again? Jack was not untouched by the darkness either. That night, the night he confronted the men who came, demanding Lily, the sounds and movements of the fight awakened memories he had tried to bury. The noise, the shouting, the surge of adrenaline in his blood, it was all too familiar to a soldier. In the nights that followed, he couldn't sleep. Lying in a small hotel room, staring at the ceiling, images replayed again and again. And then another face appeared. Lily, shivering in the snow, looking at him as if he were her last hope. What if I hadn't gotten there in time? The thought haunted Jack. He had saved Lily, but he couldn't erase what she had endured. He could protect her from physical danger, but he couldn't heal the wounds in her heart. One morning, when Jack came to visit, Henry noticed the dark circles under his eyes and his exhausted expression. "You haven't been sleeping, have you?" Henry asked softly. Jack shook his head. "I keep thinking, maybe I handled it wrong." Lily saw that confrontation. She's living in fear. Maybe I should have done things differently. Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing. But healing doesn't happen overnight, Jack. Both you and Lily need time." That Friday, the court sent notice. Lily would be required to testify formally at the preliminary hearing. She would have to sit across from Mark, the father who had betrayed her, and tell her story again. When Jack read the notice, His chest felt heavy. Lily was only 7 years old. How could a child bear this kind of legal pressure? He found Lily sitting by the window, watching the snow fall. She didn't turn when she heard his footsteps. "Lily," Jack said gently, "I need to talk to you." She kept her eyes on the window, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. I have to go to court. I have to see my dad." Jack sat down beside her. "You don't have to do it if you're not ready. I can talk to the lawyers." "No," Lily interrupted him and turned to face him for the first time. Her blue eyes were full of tears, but also filled with resolve. "I have to. If I don't tell the truth, my dad won't be held responsible. And maybe he'll do the same thing to another child." Her words stunned Jack. A 7-year-old carrying such a heavy sense of responsibility. "But you're just," Jack began, then stopped. He realized Lily was no longer an innocent child. She had been forced to grow up too soon, too fast, and that was a loss that could never be undone. That night, Jack sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance. The Whitakers were asleep. Lily was too after yet another nightmare. He felt helpless. He could fight enemies. He could protect Lily from danger. But how could he fight the pain inside a child's heart? The door creaked softly. Lily stepped out, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red and swollen. "Uncle Jack, I can't sleep." Jack opened his arms. She ran to him and curled up against his chest. They sat in silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire. "Uncle," Lily whispered. "Is the road ahead very long?" Jack held her tighter. "Yes, Lily, it is long. But I'll walk it with you one step at a time." And in the darkness of that night, two people, an adult and a child, faced their pain together, without running from it, without hiding it. Because that was the only way to heal. The wall clock struck 2 in the morning when a soft cry came from Lily's room. Jack woke instantly, his soldier's instincts always alert. He had been sleeping on the living room sofa where he was staying temporarily to help the Whitakers care for Lily. He hurried to her room. The door stood open. Lily sat curled up on the bed, clutching her stuffed bear, her whole body trembling. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting her small silhouette on the wall like a lost child adrift in endless darkness. "Lily," Jack said softly as he knelt beside the bed, "did you have another bad dream?" She looked up at him, her eyes red and brimming with tears. "Uncle, I was so scared," she sobbed. "In my dream, you left me too. Grandma May, Grandpa Henry, everyone went away. I was all alone again." Jack felt his heart tighten painfully. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened his arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily threw herself into his arms, holding on as if afraid he might disappear. "Uncle, I'm scared everyone will leave me. I'm scared that one day you'll get tired of me too, like my dad said." Her words cut Jack to the core. He held her tighter, feeling her shaky breaths against his chest. In that moment, he made a decision. It was time to share the truth about himself. "Lily," Jack said hoarsely, "I want to tell you a story about a soldier who was once very afraid." Lily looked up at him, curiosity mixed with surprise. "You were afraid?" Jack nodded, his gaze drifting into the distance. "Many years ago, when I was serving far from home, I met a little boy named Hassan. He was 8 years old, about your age. Bright eyes, the sweetest smile. He used to run out to greet me and tell me stories about his family." "What happened?" Lily asked softly. Jack took a deep breath. "One day, everything turned into chaos. I had to leave in a hurry. And that boy, I didn't get there in time." The light in his eyes went out. Tears rolled down Jack's face, tears he had held back for years. "From that moment on, I lived with guilt. I thought I had failed. I thought I didn't deserve happiness." Lily held his hand tightly, her small eyes full of understanding. "But you saved me." "Yes," Jack nodded, smiling through his tears. "And do you know what I realized when I saved you? Sometimes, saving someone else is how we save ourselves. You taught me that I can still do good, that I can still protect someone." "So you were scared too, just like me?" Lily asked quietly. "Very scared," Jack admitted. "I was afraid I wasn't strong enough, afraid I would fail again. But then I met you, and you showed me that even when we're scared, we can still stand up, we can still love." Lily was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Uncle, I'm really scared too, but if you stay with me, I think I can learn not to be so afraid." Jack pulled her close and whispered, "I'll always be here, Lily. Always." The next morning, As the first sunlight filtered through the windows, May walked into the kitchen and saw Jack and Lily sitting at the table, drinking warm milk together. They both looked lighter, as if some of the weight had lifted. May poured herself a cup of tea and sat down with them. "Jack, it looks like you and Lily talked a lot last night." Jack nodded. "We did. We shared things." May smiled gently. "That's a good thing. Sometimes, speaking our pain out loud is the first step toward healing." Lily looked at her, then asked softly, "Grandma, have you ever been very sad?" May nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, my dear. I lost a son once. He was a soldier too, like Uncle Jack. When the news came, I thought I would never smile again." "But you smile now," Lily said. "Yes," May replied, her eyes shining with tears, "because I learned something. Pain doesn't disappear, sweetheart. It stays, like a scar. But we can learn to live with it, and we can still find happiness." "How?" Lily asked, her eyes curious. May placed her hand over Lily's. "By loving the people who are still with us, by remembering the good things, and by allowing ourselves to heal." Lily fell silent, thinking. Then she looked at Jack, looked at May, and for the first time in days, a small smile appeared on her lips. I want to learn how to do that." That afternoon, Jack, Lily, and the Whitakers sat together by the fireplace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the warm house, laughter filled the air. Henry told old stories about Montana, about hunting trips, about harsh winters filled with memories. May knitted, occasionally adding a dry remark that made everyone laugh. Lily sat in Jack's lap, listening, her eyes shining. She felt this was what she had always longed for, a real family. Not a perfect one, but a family where people understood one another, accepted one another, and loved one another, despite wounds that had yet to fully heal. "Uncle Jack," Lily said softly, I'm not so scared anymore." Jack looked down at her and smiled. "Why is that?" "Because I know, even when I'm scared, I'm not alone. You, Grandma May, Grandpa Henry, you're all here." Jack hugged her tighter. "And we always will be, Lily. Always." That night, Lily slept without nightmares. She dreamed of sunshine, of flowers blooming in the snow, of a road ahead long, but filled with light. And Jack, for the first time in many years, slept deeply too, no haunting memories, no guilt, because they had found each other in the darkness, and together they were stepping into the light. Spring arrived in Montana with wildflowers blooming across green meadows, melting snow giving way to clear streams winding through the pine forests. But inside courtroom number 3 at the county courthouse, the atmosphere was stretched tight, like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Lily Carter, 8 years old, her birthday having passed just a month earlier, sat in the witness chair. She wore a light blue dress May had sewn for her, her hair neatly tied back, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Before her, the courtroom was packed. Jurors, attorneys, and farther back, Mark Carter with his head bowed, and Vanessa Carter sitting upright, her face unreadable. Jack sat in the back row beside the Whitakers. His heart pounded. He wanted to rush forward, scoop Lily up, and shield her from the weight of so many judging eyes. But he knew this was a battle Lily had to fight herself, and she was ready. The judge, Judge Morrison, a grey-haired woman with a stern face, softened by kind eyes, looked at Lily and spoke gently. "Lily, can you tell the court what happened?" Lily nodded and took a deep breath. Her voice was small at first, but it gradually grew clearer, steadier. "After my mom passed away, my dad married Vanessa," Lily said. "At first, she was nice to me, but then everything changed." Lily paused and swallowed. "She started, pushing me away. Some days, she locked my bedroom door and wouldn't let me out. I was hungry, but I was too scared to knock. The courtroom was so quiet that every breath could be heard." Several jurors wiped away tears. Lily continued, her voice trembling but unbroken. "My dad, he listened to everything Vanessa said. He changed. He treated me like I wasn't his daughter anymore." "And that night?" the judge asked softly. "The night you were left in the snowstorm?" Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "Dad told me to get in the car. He said we were going somewhere fun. But when we got there, he stopped the car and told me to get out. I asked why, and he just said, 'You're too much for me. You'll live with someone else from now on.'" Mark Carter, seated at the defense table, lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. Vanessa remained perfectly still, staring ahead without a trace of remorse. "I begged him," Lily went on, "but he drove away anyway. I tried to run after the car, but it was too fast. Then the snow started falling harder, and it got dark. I was so cold. I thought no one would ever find me." Lily looked toward Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Until Uncle Jack came. He saved me." Mark's defense attorney, a middle-aged man in a black suit, stood up. "Lily, did your father ever say he did this because he was under financial pressure?" Lily shook her head. "No, I only heard him say I was a burden." The attorney sat down, with no further questions. The judge looked at Lily again. "Is there anything else you'd like to say?" Lily was silent for a moment, then spoke words that made the entire courtroom hold its breath. "I don't understand why my dad did this. Maybe he had problems I didn't know about. But I don't hate him." Her voice trembled, but it was sincere. "I just want to be safe, and to be loved. That's what every child deserves." Tears flowed freely throughout the courtroom. Mark Carter broke down, sobbing into his hands. Vanessa did not move. 2 weeks later, the trial concluded. The jury took only 3 hours to reach a verdict. Judge Morrison stood and read the sentences. Defendant Mark Carter is found guilty of attempted harm to a child, child abandonment, and financial fraud. Sentence: 15 years of incarceration. Mark collapsed into his chair, weeping. Defendant Vanessa Carter is found guilty of attempted harm to a child, child abandonment, financial fraud, and conspiracy to seize assets. Sentence: 25 years of incarceration. Vanessa showed no reaction. Only a cold smile flickered briefly across her lips. The judge continued. The court appoints Henry and May Whitaker as the legal guardians of Lily Carter, and the court formally recognizes the actions of Mr. Jack Mercer, who saved the child's life on that fateful night. Applause filled the courtroom. Jack stood as Lily, crying in May's arms, looked at him and smiled through her tears. "Uncle, is it over now?" she asked. Jack nodded and held her close. "It's over, sweetheart. You're free." That afternoon, they returned to the Whitakers' home. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange. Lily ran into the yard, arms spread wide, welcoming the warm spring breeze. "Grandma, Grandpa, Uncle Jack," she cried. "I feel so light." May smiled through happy tears. Henry placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You did it, Jack. You saved her." Jack looked at Lily, no longer trembling, no longer afraid. She had found her voice. She had stood up, told the truth, and won. "No," Jack said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "She saved herself." And in that moment, as the sunset bathed everything in golden light, Jack felt peace for the first time in many years. Justice had been served. Lily was safe. And the future, a bright future, lay open before them. Summer came to Montana with fields of wildflowers in full bloom, deep blue skies, and the cheerful song of birds. Jack stood in front of his parents' old log house, the place where he had grown up, the place he once believed he would never return to. The walls were faded, the roof weathered with moss, weeds growing thick around the porch. But to Jack, it was no longer a relic of the past. It was the place where he would build his future. He held a hammer, nails, and stacks of new wooden boards. Each strike of the hammer echoed through the quiet, like the heartbeat of a life coming back to life. Fixing the roof, repainting the walls, replacing the old windows, each task was simple, yet it gave him a true sense of living, not merely existing as he had for so many years. In the afternoon, as the sun began to tilt westward, Jack sat on the porch and looked out at the garden he had just planted. Sunflower seeds, tomatoes, pumpkins, all of them were sprouting, pushing their way up through the soil, like Jack himself, slowly coming back to life after years of darkness. A car horn sounded. Henry pulled his old pickup truck up to the gate, and Lily jumped out, a basket of baked goods in her hands. "Uncle Jack, Grandma May baked these for you," she called as she ran toward him, her eyes shining. Jack smiled and took the basket. "Thank you, sweetheart. Come inside and have some water." Lily stepped in and looked around in amazement. "You've fixed so much. The house looks beautiful now." "Do you like it?" Jack asked. "I love it," Lily exclaimed. It's like you're making everything new again." Jack was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "That's right, Lily. I'm rebuilding my life." Over the next few months, Jack and Lily spent more and more time together. Every week, He visited the Whitakers' home, gardening with Lily, teaching her to recognize different plants, showing her how to care for flowers. She changed noticeably, no longer timid or afraid. She laughed more, talked more, her eyes lighting up whenever she shared something new she had learned. May arranged piano lessons for Lily. Every afternoon, gentle music drifted from the living room, awkward notes at first, but full of feeling. Lily also began drawing, not just for fun, but as a way to express what she felt inside. One weekend afternoon, Jack stopped by. Lily was sitting by the window, deeply focused on her drawing. When she saw him, she jumped up, her eyes sparkling. "Uncle Jack, I'm finished. I want to give this to you." Jack looked at the picture, a tall soldier and a small girl standing together in a field of white snow. Behind them, the sun was rising from behind the clouds, sending out bright golden rays. In the lower corner, Lily had written in neat, careful letters, "Uncle Jack taught me that no matter how dark it gets, there is always a sun waiting ahead." Jack felt his throat tighten. He knelt down and hugged Lily tightly. "Thank you, Lily. I'll keep this forever." Lily smiled and hugged him back. "Thank you too, for not leaving me." That evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, Jack sat by the fireplace with the Whitakers. The drawing lay on the table, firelight dancing across the paper. "She's changed so much," May said with a smile. "She's found herself again. And so have you, Jack," Henry added. "We can see it. You're not the same man who came back here." Jack nodded, watching the flames. "Lily taught me something important. We can't change the past, but we can build the future." "And have you forgiven yourself?" May asked gently. Jack was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I think I've started to. I understand now that I couldn't save everyone, but I saved Lily, and maybe that's enough." May placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's not just enough, Jack. That's everything." In the months that followed, life slowly settled into a steady rhythm. Jack finished restoring the house, turning it into a true home. He took work as a carpenter in the local community, helping people repair their homes. The work was simple, but meaningful. Each house he fixed, each family he helped, was a way of giving back. Lily grew brighter by the day. She joined a piano class in town, made friends her own age. In the afternoons, she ran and played in the yard, laughing like any other child, something she once believed she would never have. One late autumn afternoon, as golden leaves covered the yard, Jack and Lily sat together on the swing Henry had built. They rocked gently, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Uncle," Lily said softly, "I still remember that night, the night you saved me, but I'm not scared anymore." "Why's that?" Jack asked. "Because I know that no matter what happens, someone loves me. There's always a sun after the storm." Jack smiled and brushed her hair back. "And you taught me that too." Lily looked at him, her eyes lighting up. "Really?" "Really," Jack nodded. "You taught me that loving and being loved, that's what life is about." Lily hugged him tightly and whispered, "I love you, Uncle Jack. I love you too, Lily." And in that moment, as the sunset painted the sky in gold, Jack felt completely at peace. He had found his home, not the place where he was born, but the place he chose to belong, a place filled with love, a place filled with hope, a place with Lily. Snow drifted down gently like white butterflies, laying a delicate blanket across the Whitakers' yard. A year had passed since the fateful night, the night Jack found Lily in the middle of a snowstorm. But today, the snow no longer felt cold or frightening. It fell softly and peacefully, like nature's greeting to a new beginning. Inside the cozy log house, the fireplace crackled, spreading warmth throughout the room. The scent of freshly baked gingerbread lingered in the air, mixed with cheerful voices and laughter. May was setting the table with a small cake, topped with 2 candles, one for Jack, one for Lily, symbolizing the journey they had traveled together. A car pulled up outside. Lily, now 8.5, jumped up from her chair and ran to the door. She wore a red sweater May had knitted for her, her hair pulled into a high ponytail, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Uncle Jack's here," she shouted. Jack stepped out of the car holding a small gift box. He wore a thick coat, but the heaviness and exhaustion he once carried were gone. His face looked brighter, his eyes no longer shadowed by the past. He had found peace. Lily ran out into the snowy yard, not caring as snowflakes settled in her hair. "Uncle Jack, the snow isn't scary anymore. We won't get lost again, right?" Jack laughed, a real, radiant laugh that came straight from his heart. He knelt down and opened his arms. Lily threw herself into them, wrapping her arms tightly around his neck. "We'll never be lost again," Jack whispered, "because you and I have found home." Lily looked at him, her eyes shining. "Where is home, Uncle?" Jack looked around the warm Whitaker house, Henry and May smiling in the doorway, the gentle snowfall, and Lily in his arms. "Home is here, sweetheart, right here." Inside, they gathered around the table. Henry cut the cake, May poured hot tea, and Lily chatted happily about her piano class and her new friends. Jack listened, his heart full. After dinner, they sat together by the fireplace. The flames danced, casting a warm golden glow across the room. Lily curled up in Jack's arms, hugging her stuffed bear, the gift he had given her the year before. "Uncle," Lily asked softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you ever regret stopping the car that night? Because if you hadn't stopped, you wouldn't have had to go through all those hard things." Jack was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. Then he smiled and gently brushed Lily's hair. "Never, Lily. Stopping that night was the best decision I ever made." "Why?" "Because you saved me," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like I saved you. Before I met you, I was lost. I didn't know what I was living for. You showed me that life has meaning when we love and when we're loved." Lily hugged him tighter. "Me too, Uncle. I used to think no one loved me. But you, Grandma May, Grandpa Henry, you all taught me that family isn't about blood. Family is the people who choose to stay." May wiped away tears as she reached for Henry's hand. He nodded, his eyes moist. "That's right, my dear. Family is where we are loved, accepted, and allowed to be ourselves." Jack looked around at the familiar faces, the warm house, and Lily in his arms, and realized this was the road home. Not the place where he was born, but the place he had chosen to belong. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Jack stood by the window, watching the snow fall. Henry joined him. "Have you found peace, Jack?" he asked quietly. Jack nodded. "I think I have. I've learned that we can't change the past, but we can build the future. And I've learned something else. True strength isn't never falling down. It's always getting back up and continuing to love." Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've done it, Jack. You saved Lily, and she saved you. That's the greatest miracle of all." Jack smiled and looked out the window. The snow was still falling, but beyond the white, he could see the glow of the house, warm, welcoming, safe. Sometimes, he thought, saving someone else is how we save ourselves. And no matter how dark the past may be, there is always a road home, a place where we are loved, accepted, and free to be who we are. The next morning, as the first sunlight glinted off the snow, Lily woke and ran into the living room. Jack was sitting by the fireplace, looking at the picture she had drawn, the soldier and the little girl standing in the snow, the sun rising behind them. "Do you like my picture?" Lily asked as she sat beside him. "I love it," Jack replied, "because it reminds me that there's always light after darkness." Lily smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Uncle Jack. I love you too, Lily. Always." They sat there in peaceful silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft fall of snow outside. And in that moment, everything was just right. Jack had found his way home. Lily had found true love. And together, one adult and one child, they had healed each other's wounds with compassion, perseverance, and unconditional love. This was a new beginning. This was hope. This was home. The story of Jack and Lily is a reminder that sometimes what we need most is not to forget the past, but the courage to face it, to face the pain within ourselves, to hear the silent cries for help in others, and to recognize that saving someone else can be a way of saving ourselves. Like a veteran returning from the battlefield, Jack found a new purpose in life, not in medals or victories, but in the middle of a Montana snowstorm where a lonely, abandoned little girl needed him. And in saving Lily, Jack was finally freed from the memories that had haunted him for so many years. Every day, there are children silently crying out for help. Every day, there are people like Jack searching for meaning. And sometimes, fate brings them together not by chance, but because both are in need of one another. If this story has touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel to continue following stories of courage, healing, and hope. Because sometimes, a single story can change the way we see the world and perhaps even save a life. Please share this video with the people you care about. The more people learn to recognize the warning signs hidden behind a seemingly perfect surface, the more children can be protected. And if you or someone you know is going through a cold winter in life, remember this: someone is always watching, and someone is always willing to stop and help. Spring will come. You deserve to be loved. Never give up, and never be afraid to speak up.